Thank you, Erica. Real pleasure to be here today and to discuss the Altitude Charter and the urgency. I think it's time we started looking at the Altitude Charter as no longer being an optional add-on, no longer being a signature at the end of our emails. I think it's now become a necessity as the number of students engaging with disability support services is increasing year on year, that we need a change, a systems change to respond to these changes. So in this session, I will look at a brief look. It's a 15-minute, just brief introduction. I'm quite aware that I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, that we're all UDL advocates here. So I'm just providing some empirical evidence background into why this charter needs to be implemented sooner rather than later, ASAP, in my own opinion. And I think I'm speaking for most people in the room, and certainly from the perspective of a head. So I look at policy, I look at legislation, a really brief look here now, some statistics as well to back it up, so some empirical evidence and statistics. Labour market trends that combine to add the urgency to adoption, the implementation of Altitude. So the importance of a tertiary education and a higher education qualification in contemporary Ireland to enter into the labour market. So we're even talking about post-tertiary education here as well, that if we have a charter embedded in our practices, in our HEIs, that will help with progression, it will help with retention, and will help with outcomes post tertiary education. So what we are finding in the session, I will be discussing the increase in numbers of disabled students engaging with support services. The difference between the data that we collect at AHEAD and the HEA data, I'm not saying ours is better or ours is, but they are different. We would engage with disability support services, and we would get the numbers who are engaging with support services, as opposed to Equal Status Act data, which is just numbers of people who have ticked that box on the Equal Status Act survey. So we would be able then to disaggregate that data by fields of study, by disability category, and get a little bit more detailed data, which I will speak a little bit further in this presentation as to why that really speaks to disclosure and gives us an idea of the number of students who are not disclosing disability, which to me highlights an even greater need for Altitude, because we have students who are not disclosing disability for a wide range of reasons, including stigma, problems maybe on future careers. Some of these are well-founded reasons, to be fair. So if we have UDL embedded in practices, that would be really helpful to students who have not disclosed disability also. I'll be looking at the importance of tertiary education and fostering pathways into meaningful and rewarding employment, which is kind of what I've just said. And I will also be discussing, excuse me, AHEAD research and output regarding the delivery of supports and further and higher education that highlights the need for a change in mindset and practice. Basically, what I'm talking there is inclusion is everybody's business. So a cross-campus approach. There is an onus, and I know particularly from my own experience, of focusing on universal design for learning, and potentially, again, speaking from my own perspective, I don't know if anyone can identify, forgetting about the cross-campus, forgetting about the learning, forgetting about the built environment, forgetting is probably one word, not placing enough importance on the digital environment and social engagement with students, which I think the Charter responds to all of these things. So setting the scene, so I won't go too much into this, so setting the scene into why we need Altitude. So obviously it's a response to the rights, it's a response to the UNCRPD, Equal Status Act, a whole wide range of rights mechanisms into why we need to create equitable pathways for disabled students to progress through higher education. And I won't go through them all, but we're talking about in the National Access Plan and in the FET strategy, we have embedded right in the centre of it is a commitment to UD and UDL. Current and forthcoming FET strategy, as I've just discussed, census data which demonstrated a rising percentage of disabled people in the country, and that's also reflected in the higher education and further education populations. We have the highest participation rates of young people engaging in higher education in Europe. which is really good news, really welcome news, but it has to be cautiously welcomed because alongside that, we also have one of the widest gaps between non-disabled people and disabled students in Europe in engaging with higher level. So that's quite a surprising finding, actually, that it's just been published by O'Connell. To me, I was quite surprised. So good news that we have lots of people engaging with higher education. What's not so good is that there's a massive gap between non-disabled people who are engaging with tertiary education and those who identify as disabled. There's one of the widest gaps in Europe there also. So cautiously welcome that. Why is higher education really important in contemporary Ireland? It's been accepted in the current, well, it's not current, it's 2016, the skills strategy, the Fund and the Future publications that come out every year, that the Irish economy has pivoted to a knowledge-based economy. So what does that mean? That means that there is an onus on a third level qualification into entering into meaningful employment. Now, there's a caveat to this. We can't force people to want meaningful employment. Maybe some people don't. But for those that do, there should be equitable pathways to achieve this. So we have DARE and we have a whole bunch of access routes. We have to look beyond access now. And I think this is what this does. I think this is what Altitude does. So we're doing the DARE review right now, and 9% of CAO applicants are responding through DARE. And I think we need to look past access, because I think the National Access Plan has been really successful in increasing the numbers of students who are engaging with disability support services in Ireland. Our forthcoming research will say that that has increased by 400% in 16 years. Again, I'm going to just leave that there, I think. Again, a really welcome statistic, but I do think we need to look past access and look at the journey through and through third level education, that it has to be equitable. And I think, again, sorry to risk labouring on a point, I think Altitude really does foment this. And the accepted intersection of disability and poverty in contemporary Ireland, education is accepted to be something that breaks this. It precipitates social mobility, basically. Again, if that is what the student wants. So Ireland and tertiary education. So third level education is now considered to be necessary if you want a career in the current labour market, which is dominated by science, education, computing, health and engineering. That's a Eurostat publication. So we're no longer a service-led economy. We are now firmly knowledge-based. So a qualification in any one of these things increases the chances of a disabled person living a meaningful life in an equal manner to their non-disabled peers. I think Altitude will have a huge, huge role in this. So we have a continuous increase in Irish people accessing tertiary education altogether. The whole student body, 400,000 in 2023, and that's on further and higher education. It's pretty much split down the middle. But that's, what are we, 5 million? We're talking 1/10 of the population are in tertiary education. And 22% of the Irish population identifies disabled. So we do need some type of a plan. We have access routes. We need some type of a plan that makes them pathways through tertiary education equitable and fair. So while Ireland, as I just spoke, has the highest rate of higher education in Europe, we still have one of the widest gaps. I think that's I wouldn't say frightening, but that's a concerning statistic in my opinion. And just to really highlight that point, so the current census data from Census 2022, this is another surprising statistic, 63% of 25 to 34-year-olds have a tertiary qualification. Again, highest in Europe by a long shot. The European average is 41%. So we've huge numbers of people accessing tertiary education. We have exponential rises in disabled people engaging in tertiary education and access and support services. So follows on that we need something to make them pathways equitable and fair. Sorry, bit of repeat myself slightly there, just really trying to hammer home these points. So some of the contexts that we have here. So we have rising diversity in the student body. Those of you that are aware of the, excuse me, I just have to drink of this drink that keeps falling on the ground. We've rising diversity in the student body. So our last participate, as most of you know, I had publish participation rate reports every year where we look at students who are engaged with support services. Our last one identified a 364% increase. Now in our forthcoming research, that's even gone up to 400%, which points to the success of the National Access Plan, PAD funding streams, and a lot of these access instruments that have been put in place. Again, we need to start looking at beyond access. Huge burden on support staff. So alongside this exponential increase in students engaging with support services, we have not seen a tantamount increase in support service staff. So they're massively overburdened and massively under-resourced, which I think, as I will discuss again, leads to some problems down the road. Dissatisfied students, overburdened staff. We have legislative and policy responsibilities that we need to, that Altitude will help us respond to, and a sectoral commitment to education is everyone's business. In the interest of time, I think I'll move on because there's a little bit of increase. So we do a little bit of on this participation rates, where we look at inside services, we look at the number of disability support staff and learning support staff per student every year. And what we found is that we have massive increases in students, not being reflected in support staff increases. So the ratio of students to support staff member increased from 131 students per support staff member to 191 students per support staff. So a 21% increase in 1 year. And I don't think I need to go into the difficulties and challenges that perpetuates. I mean, you don't have enough staff. We have staff who are not able to put their expertise where they are most needed. We all know that UDL does not take away the need for accommodations altogether. We will still need accommodations. We know the pyramid, we know the caste pyramid. We will still need some accommodations for some high needs students. But if we look at inclusion at the point of course design, we can remove, for want of a better word, some of them accommodations, ease the pressure on students and increase student satisfaction levels as they go through their third level education. And AHEAD research has continuously stated that the current paradigm for supports is unsustainable. Now, the goals of the National Access Plan, inclusivity, flexibility, coherence, clarity, sustainability. I think I need a round of applause for remembering all that, to be perfectly honest with you. Thank you. So it's certainly not sustainable, okay? We could argue that it is inclusive to an extent, but if we introduce Altitude, it will become more inclusive. It will certainly become more flexible. And again, as I say, the implementation, I think this is a huge point. Because we have this massive increase and we're not seeing the ratio increasing at the same time, I think the implementation of the Charter will enable support staff, disability support staff, to use their time and their expertise where they are most needed, in the top of the pyramid. For those that aren't aware of the caste pyramid, it goes to high needs. So we will still need accommodations. And if we introduce the Altitude Charter, when we introduce the Altitude Charter, support staff will be able to support these people from the top of these high need students who need accommodations, who need support. Okay, not saying other people won't, but hope UDL, as we all know, will remove the need for some of these accommodations for some of these students and ease some of the pressure on massively overburdened support services. So a significant, and when we talk about disclosure, and we have identified through our participation rates reports, and how we do this, a brief explanation, let's look at time. How we do this is we take HEA data and we take our own data and we look at the difference. Now, we're quite aware that this isn't, we're using different underlying data sets, okay? So we can only infer from this. We can't actually say, we can't say this is 100%, but I think we can make a justifiable inference from this, in that a significant percentage of new entrant students have have a disability but do not disclose and register for support. So where we get this data is from the HEA, which again, as I reiterate, has been drawn from the Equal Status Act. So people ticking boxes in the Equal Status Act and identifying as disabled, but not registering for supports. So a significant percentage of new entrant students have a disability but do not there's been a 59% increase in the number of students with disabilities per support staff member in the last 10 years. Sorry, apologies. So we can see how we can see the problems that obviously. So not the problems. We can see how Altitude will respond to students who have not disclosed a disability, and as we can see, well, as we can infer, if we use HEA data and we use AHEAD data, that we would see that there's 8% of students are registered with support services. HEA would say there's 20% have ticked the equal access survey. So again, different underlying data sets, but I think we can make a justifiable inference that there's a large cohort of students who have identified as disabled but are not in receipt of any supports. And Altitude will obviously really help with that. The number of students in higher education registered with support services has risen by 100%. So just really highlighting what I've just said, 8%. Now we get into a 10-year overview of overall supports registering with HE. So since 2014 and our last participation rate period, which was 2003 and 2024, I'll go through this really quickly because I'm a bit stuck for time. Total students with disabilities has increased by 109%. And that percentage of the population is 57%. So really, again, just highlighting the number of students, which is exponentially increasing. So what does this mean when we talk about FSD funding? When we got this data from the HEA, what we found was that the students per support staff member had risen from 116 to 137, so an 18% increase in students per support staff member. So that ratio of 116 students per support staff member has risen by 38%. Now we have 137. When we looked at the FSD average budget per student in the same year, the same time frame, that decreased by 35%. So it went from €650 per person registered for supports to €423. So again, we're looking at Altitude in helping to remedy some of these issues, and some of these students will not need as much support if we have. I'm down to 1 minute, so I better run this really quickly. So what does this create? So it creates. So many supports are severely under-resourced, so we have difficulties working against the backdrop of the FSD guidelines and framework. So the need for medical evidence verification is creating lots of problems. And what we have found is that we have a dichotomy between some support staff who really place importance in the legislation and others who place importance in the FSD guidelines. So different treatment of students, different support of students in different colleges. So it's not consistent and it's not standardised across the landscape. And what this creates massive dissatisfaction for students. I'll let you read that yourself because I'm stuck for time, but we can see that almost 4 out of 10 from each one have difficulties. That their accommodations have not been effective in their studies, their accommodations have not materialised into the lecture hall, and it has not been easy to contact support staff members. So student satisfaction, again, because of the overburdening of support staff. So again, Altitude, massively important in remedying another one of these. These slides will be available anyway, so I'm nearly finished, so I'm not too far beyond time, so we can segue into the three new adoptees. So we all know the rights that these respond to the Equal Status Act. Just to reiterate, I've been through these already, UNCRPD and the Equal Status Act, and I'll finalise with the vision of Altitude, which I'm sure will be discussed in the next one, so we don't need to go into this too much. We all know what it is. We all know what Altitude stands for. Dara says he made it up by himself. I don't believe him. I think he got it off ChatGPT. And the mission of the project, we all know, and that will be reiterated again as well. And thank you for listening. And I'd like to introduce now the 3 new adoptees, and put your hands together for them, please, because it's a really great to see 3 new